They said silence meant peace. But the silence I grew up with wasn't peace. It was punishment. My name is Clara Monroe. I'm 32 years old. And the night I walked into my sister's wedding alone, I wasn't just stepping into a ballroom. I was walking straight into every judgment my family ever made about me. I could feel it before I even reached the door. The weight of their whispers. The eyes that followed. The smiles that never reached their eyes. Clara Monroe, the career woman, the one who forgot to get married, the one who scares men away with her independence. That was the story they told about me. My sister, Eliza, had always been the shining daughter, the one with the right looks, the right husband, the right life. And me, I was the lesson parents told their daughters to avoid becoming. The ballroom glowed with gold chandeliers and staged perfection. Every detail screamed luxury. Eliza's dress, the flower walls, the curated laughter. I stood at the edge of it all, in a simple black dress that didn't belong in their fairy tale. Every time someone turned their head, I could read their thoughts before their lips moved. Poor Clara, still alone, still too much. I could have stayed home. I had work deadlines, a company to run, a board meeting in Zurich the following week. But I came anyway. Maybe part of me still wanted to believe that blood meant something. That family could eventually see beyond the labels they'd given me. When my mother called that morning, her voice was light, careless. "Remember, sweetheart, don't wear anything too serious. This is Eliza's day, not a business event." I laughed softly. "Don't worry, Mom, I know my place." And I did. I always had. I knew what it meant to shrink, to speak softly, to let others sparkle so I wouldn't be accused of stealing light. But that night, as I stepped through the doors alone, something in me refused to bow anymore. The music faded slightly when I entered, as if the room itself paused to measure me. My sister didn't even glance my way. She was busy smiling for the cameras, a diamond version of herself. I found my seat near the back, surrounded by strangers who glanced between my bare ring finger and the name card that read, Clara Monroe. Plus none. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I was used to it. But the truth? It still burned. That quiet kind of hurt that hides under the ribs, where no one can see it. And just as I lifted my glass, ready to swallow it all down like I'd done 1,000 times before, something unexpected happened. An older man at the front table, silver hair, commanding presence, stood up slowly and turned toward me. I recognized him from news articles and magazine covers. William Hartwell, the groom's uncle, and the CEO of one of the largest tech corporations in the country. He looked straight at me. Then, to everyone's shock, he bowed. A deep, deliberate bow of respect. The entire ballroom froze. And in that instant, the story they'd written about me, the lonely sister, the cautionary tale, began to crumble. Growing up in the Monroe household felt like being trapped in a spotlight that was never mine. My sister Eliza was the sun, bright, adored, constantly orbiting the attention of our parents and everyone around her. And me, I was the shadow that made her shine brighter. It started small, birthdays forgotten, achievements dismissed. When I got accepted into an advanced STEM program at 14, my mother congratulated me, then asked if I could tutor Eliza for her algebra test. When I graduated college early, my father told people, "Clara's good with numbers," as if I'd won a participation ribbon. But when Eliza posted a photo in her cheer uniform, it was framed and hung in the hallway. I used to think love had to be earned, so I worked harder. Straight A's, scholarships, a job offer before graduation, all met with polite nods and phrases like, "We're so proud of both our girls." Both. Never me alone. At family dinners, conversations turned into performance reviews. My mother's questions about my career were laced with something sharp. "You're still single, right?" My father would add, "You should slow down. No man likes a woman who's too ambitious." I learned to breathe through those moments, to smile, to change the subject, to disappear without leaving the table. I remember once, I must have been 25. I showed up at Eliza's engagement dinner straight from the airport after closing a funding deal overseas. My presentation had been published in Forbes that week. But when I arrived, All anyone wanted to talk about was Eliza's ring. My mother leaned over and whispered, "Don't bring up work tonight?" "Okay. Let her have her moment." So, I didn't. I sat there, invisible, while they toasted her to a lifetime of happiness. That phrase stuck with me. A lifetime of happiness. Because in our family, happiness had rules. Be beautiful, be agreeable, be chosen. I had broken all three. The older I got, the clearer it became. Every success of mine seemed to make them uncomfortable, as if my independence was a mirror they didn't want to look into. When I bought my first condo, my father asked if I was sure I didn't want a man's name on the mortgage. When my startup secured its first round of investment, my mother said, "You don't want to intimidate people, dear, especially men." There were nights I'd come home to an empty apartment, still hearing their voices echo in my head. The careful tones, the backhanded advice, the way they made me feel like every victory was a mistake. I'd pour a glass of wine and scroll through photos of Eliza's smiling family, their vacations, her baby showers, her perfect little world. She'd call sometimes, not to ask how I was, but to brag disguised as concern. "You should take time off. Clara, life isn't just work." But work was all I had that didn't judge me. Work was the one place I could exist without apology. And then came the call. It was a Sunday afternoon. Quiet. Gray. The kind of day that makes memories feel louder. My mother's voice on the phone was too sweet. Too careful. "Clara, we're all so excited. Eliza's getting married again. You'll come, won't you?" There it was. The expectation wrapped in guilt. The unspoken rule. You show up, even if you don't belong. I said yes, out of habit more than love. But after the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at the skyline outside my window. The city I'd built my life in, far away from their world. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't agreeing to go for them. I was going for me, to walk into that ballroom, the place where they'd written me off, and stand tall without needing anyone to save me. That decision became the quiet rebellion I'd been waiting for my whole life. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of my mirror longer than I expected. The city outside my window was barely awake. Gray dawn over glass towers. My reflection stared back at me. Calm, controlled, composed. I picked the black dress deliberately. Sleek, quiet, unapologetic. It wasn't mourning, it was armor. I drove to the venue with the windows down and no music. Just the hum of the highway and the steady rhythm of my thoughts. This wasn't about family or forgiveness anymore. This was about facing the echo of my past without flinching. When I arrived, the valet hesitated, unsure if I was a guest or staff. I gave him my name and saw recognition flicker. "Monroe," he said softly. "You're the sister." Yes, the sister. The forgotten one. The spare part in a machine built to celebrate someone else. Inside, everything gleamed. Chandeliers, champagne, gold accents. Eliza had built herself a spectacle. The moment she saw me, her eyes swept me from head to toe like she was assessing a problem she couldn't quite fix. "Oh, Clara, you made it," she chirped, voice sugary and brittle. "You look professional?" I smiled faintly. "That's me." She was already glancing past me toward the photographers, adjusting her veil. "Just remember, tonight's about family," she said, the words layered with old warning. "Don't make it about you." I found my seat, table 16, near the back, next to two distant cousins I barely recognized. The ceremony was flawless. Predictable. Eliza shimmered under the lights while Logan, her third husband, recited vows written by someone else. I watched politely, clapping when expected, smiling when the camera panned. But as the reception began, the same whispers returned, like insects buzzing near my ear. "Still single. She's the one who runs that company, right? The one with no kids. Poor thing. All that success and no one to share it with." Every comment chipped away at the edges of my composure, but I refused to let it show. I excused myself, walked to the bar, and ordered club soda. The bartender smiled kindly, as if he could tell I needed the quiet. That's when I heard it. The voice that cut through the room. "Miss Monroe." I turned. The man standing there wasn't a stranger. I'd seen his face on magazine covers, in conference panels. William Hartwell, Logan's uncle, the founder of a global tech empire. He was older, silver-haired, steady, the kind of man whose presence bends a room before he says a word. He studied me for a moment, then did something no one in that ballroom expected. He bowed, a clean, deliberate bow, the kind reserved for respect, not formality. The room fell silent, glasses stilled, heads turned. "I recognized you the moment you walked in," he said, his tone calm, assured. "Your Zurich keynote changed how my subsidiaries handle AI risk management. You may not remember, but your framework redirected an $80 million investment." A ripple went through the guests. My sister's smile faltered. My parents froze. And for the first time that night, every gaze in that room was fixed on me, not as a curiosity, but as someone who mattered. I felt a strange calm rise inside me. Not pride, not vindication, something quieter, recognition. "Thank you," I said simply. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Hartwell." He nodded. "The honor's mine." Then, as if nothing unusual had happened, he gestured toward the terrace. "Would you mind walking with me for a moment?" Outside, the night was crisp, the air laced with jasmine and city lights. He leaned against the railing, his voice low. "I know your work," he said, "and I know how people like your family treat women who refuse to fit the script." I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. The truth was there in the silence between us. "Men like Logan inherit power," he continued. "Women like you build it. Don't ever apologize for that." I looked out at the skyline. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the afterthought in someone else's story. When I returned inside, the shift was palpable. Conversations quieted. Eliza avoided my eyes. My parents pretended to be busy. Mr. Hartwell sat beside me for dinner, speaking to me as an equal while the others fidgeted. It wasn't just acknowledgement, it was correction. And as I sat there, surrounded by the same family who had once made me question my worth, I realized something vital. I had already left them long ago. I just hadn't walked out the door yet. That night, I finally did. Not in anger, not in triumph, but in peace. The wedding ended the way most illusions do. Too bright, too loud, desperate to hide the cracks. As the band played its final encore and guests flooded the dance floor, I slipped outside into the cool air. The sound of laughter echoed behind me, hollow and rehearsed. I leaned against the stone railing, looking out at the glowing city beyond, feeling the weight of decades slowly lift from my shoulders. For once, I wasn't running away. I was standing still. And that was enough. I thought the night was over. But then I heard my name. Clara. It was my mother. She stood in the doorway, her clutch pressed tight to her chest. Her eyes darted nervously around, making sure no one saw her talking to me alone. "You look beautiful tonight," she said softly, her voice almost unfamiliar in its gentleness. "Thank you," I replied. She hesitated, then added, "We didn't know about all that. The Zurich thing. Mr. Hartwell recognizing you. You've done so well." I looked at her for a long moment. The woman who'd spent years pretending not to notice me now spoke as if pride could erase absence. "You're proud now?" I asked quietly. "Of course," she said quickly. "We always were." "No, Mom. You were proud of Eliza, of her rings, her photos, her husbands. You never asked about what I was building. You just assumed I'd outgrow it." Her mouth opened, then closed again. The silence between us stretched like a wound. "We just wanted you to be happy," she murmured. "No," I said gently. "You wanted me to be acceptable." She reached for my hand. "Clara, please." I let her touch linger for a second, then slipped free. "It's okay, Mom. You don't have to fix this. You can't." I turned to leave, but another voice stopped me. "Clara, wait." Eliza stood a few steps away, bouquet drooping, mascara smudged just enough to make her look human. Her perfect smile was gone. "I didn't know he knew you," she blurted out. "Uncle William, you never said anything. You never asked." I replied, "That's not fair." she snapped. You always made me feel like I wasn't enough. I laughed. But it wasn't cruel. You think you weren't enough? You had everything. The attention, the love, the approval I begged for. You took it like air. Her voice cracked. You think it was easy living in your shadow? Everyone comparing me to your degrees, your company, your... I cut her off. Not with anger, but clarity. Eliza, no one compared us. You were their pride. I was their problem. We were never equals in their eyes. And maybe that's the saddest part. She looked down, twisting the bouquet. Then why come tonight? If you hate us so much, I don't hate you, I said quietly. I came because I stopped waiting for you to see me. Because this... I gestured to the glittering ballroom behind her. This story isn't mine anymore. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. You could have let me have this one night. Eliza, I whispered. You've had every night. She flinched, then turned away, her heels clattering across the marble as she disappeared back inside. Swallowed by applause that wasn't meant for her anymore. I stood there for a long time, the wind tugging at my hair, the noise fading into a distant hum. Then I felt a presence beside me. William Hartwell had come out, his tie loosened, his expression calm. I wasn't trying to make a scene, he said. I know, I replied. You made a correction. He smiled faintly. Some illusions deserve to break. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a card. I'm starting a new initiative, Global Tech Mentorship for Women Building from the Ground Up. I'd like you to lead it with me. I stared at him, caught off guard. You don't even know me. Oh, I do, he said simply. You're the kind who doesn't wait to be invited. You build your own door. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of being told I didn't belong, here was a man offering me a place built for someone exactly like me. But it wasn't the offer that mattered. It was the recognition. I didn't answer right away. I just smiled, feeling the stillness around me settle like truth. Let's talk Monday. He nodded once, respectful, and walked away. And just like that, the night that began with humiliation ended with liberation. Not loud, not cinematic, but quiet and absolute. I didn't look back when I left the venue. There was nothing left for me in that ballroom. Only ghosts of expectations I'd already outgrown. The city was half asleep when I drove home, its lights blinking like distant heartbeats. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need music. The quiet was enough. Not the heavy, suffocating kind I grew up with, but the kind that breathes, the kind that listens back. When I reached my apartment, I didn't rush inside. I stood in the hallway for a while, keys in my hand, realizing that for the first time, I wasn't returning to an empty space. I was returning to my own life, my own peace, my own name. I poured a glass of water, opened the window, and let the night air in. It smelled faintly of rain and pavement. My reflection in the glass looked softer somehow. Not because I'd changed, but because I'd stopped apologizing for who I was. Days turned into weeks, and the story of that wedding became gossip in someone else's circle, not mine. My mother sent a few texts, polite, uncertain, full of half-formed attempts at connection. I answered kindly but briefly. Eliza didn't reach out at all, and I didn't expect her to. Some distances aren't meant to close. Instead, I filled my days with creation. The project with William Hartwell grew quickly, not because of power or privilege, but because it was built on something real. Opportunity for women who had been underestimated their whole lives. The first time I stood in that new conference room, full of young engineers and founders, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging, not given, earned. One evening, as the sun sank low behind the skyline, I stayed late at the office, reviewing plans. The floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the city in gold. I caught my reflection again, not the quiet girl who used to fold herself smaller at family dinners, but a woman who had learned that her worth never needed to be proven, only lived. I thought about that night. The bow, the silence, the toast. The way the room shifted when truth was spoken aloud. It wasn't revenge I'd found. It was freedom. My phone buzzed with a message from William. The world catches up eventually. Clara, you were just ahead of it. I smiled. Maybe he was right. Maybe all those years of being overlooked were never punishment. Maybe they were preparation. The loneliness, the silence, the hunger to be seen, all of it had shaped me into someone who no longer needed the world's permission to exist. Later that night, I walked out onto my balcony. Below, the city hummed. Cars, laughter, life moving endlessly forward. I closed my eyes and breathed in the quiet hum of it all. Once, silence used to crush me. Now it steadied me. It wasn't emptiness anymore. It was space. And in that space, I finally found myself. The silence that once broke me, I whispered to the dark, is now the place I rebuild. So if you've ever been the forgotten one, the underestimated one, the one who stood in a room full of people and felt unseen, remember this. You don't need them to applaud you to matter. You only need to stand tall in your own truth. Because the moment you stop waiting for recognition is the moment you become unstoppable. If you've ever felt invisible, or if this story found you when you needed it most, subscribe to Vengeance Within for more stories of strength, healing, and quiet revenge that doesn't destroy, it transforms.